You're listening to Keeping Up with the Knights, a podcast for the faculty and staff at Steele High School, allowing them to connect outside of the classroom. Teacher, coach, mentor, and speaker Michael Herrera, a past District Teacher of the Year, will sit down with fellow teachers and bring their stories to life. Sit back, relax, and enjoy these stories as they unfold on this episode of Keeping Up with the Knights.
Today, I had the pleasure of sitting down with Becky Williams, a social studies teacher of the last 3 years at Steele High School. It was a great time, and I hope you enjoy it too. Please welcome Becky Williams to episode 3 of Keeping Up with the Knights. So the first part of the podcast, I always like to just to get to know the person. I mean, I know who you are, but hopefully the people that are going to be listening may not know Becky Williams, right? So we just want to warm up. So the first part of the podcast, I just call bell ringers.
Okay.
All right. So I'm going to give you a set of questions. And then as soon as I'm done, if you will do the same for me.
Sure.
Fair enough?
Fair.
All right, let's go. Favorite food when you are stressed out?
Macaroni and cheese.
That was a quick answer.
Mm-hmm.
Like straight up old school Kraft from like the grocery store?
No.
You make it from scratch?
Make it from scratch, macaroni and cheese.
All right. Usually when I'm stressed out, I want something quick and easy. I don't want to have to make anything. So
No,
good for you.
I love macaroni and cheese when I'm stressed out.
All right. Number 2, what would you tell a younger you if you could?
Love yourself.
Okay. That's always a good answer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Number 3, what's something that no one really knows about you that you would like them to?
That even though I seem very confident, I suffer from social anxiety pretty severely.
Very good.
It's something I'm overcoming daily.
If you weren't a teacher, what would you want to do as a profession?
So I've seriously considered seminary for a while, and would like to pastor or mission to certain people, certain sections of society.
Which some people can argue and say that's kind of what we do in education.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
So I think we fall in the same lines that sometimes the basketball players, they call me the preacher. Because, and it's not that I'm preaching to them, it's just I get going on life and substance and trying to teach them how to better themselves and whatnot. You know, I get going and it's hard for me to stop. So they nickname me the preacher.
That's a good nickname.
Yeah. All right. Number 5, vacation anywhere in the world. Where do you go?
New Zealand.
Why?
So I'm a nerd. I think this is obvious. I'm a history teacher. You can see all the Marvel stuff in the background. So The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings were filmed in New Zealand, and it is just the most gorgeous landscape. And also you're a hop, skip, and a jump from Australia. Those are my 2 bucket list trips.
Okay. So you've never been? No.
26-hour flight. I can't do that with 4 kids.
No, I agree. All right. Your turn.
All right. If you could have lunch with any person in history, who would it be?
It's a weird answer, but it's not really weird. Come on, who would not want to sit down and talk to Jesus?
All right.
Right.
That makes sense. Yeah. I would definitely want to have lunch with him too. All right. So if you're drinking coffee, hot or iced?
Oh, definitely hot, but I'm not a coffee drinker.
Gotcha.
I'm a coffee smeller.
I gotcha. Okay.
I thrive off of someone else's coffee, but I won't drink it. But if I do have to have a coffee, it's got to have a lot of creamer to take away that flavor. But anyway, yeah, definitely hot.
All right. Favorite dinosaur?
The Herrerasaurus.
Herrerasaurus. Is there seriously a Herrerasaurus?
Absolutely.
That is fantastic.
Yes.
I have no Williamsaurus to look up to. Okay. Favorite Marvel movie or Marvel character? Nope. None.
So, okay. So don't hate on me here. That's not my realm. Okay.
I got you.
However, growing up as a kid, I loved comic books and I would collect comic books, and my favorite was Wolverine.
Wolverine. I can see that. Logan's a good character.
Yep.
All right. And then my last question, funny enough, is the same as you had for me. What's your dream vacation?
My wife and I just talked about this because with kids, vacation for us is not going to happen. Yeah. Vacation for us is family vacation to the beach, quick trip, like in and out, right? But for me, it would be going back to Greece for our third time.
Oh, wow.
And specifically Santorini, because Santorini was a place that we decided to splurge on when we went to Europe for a month. And Greece was on strike at that time. And it was a public strike, so no public transportation. But it started after we got there. Oh. So there's only one flight in and out of Santorini every day. So we took a flight. We arrived at Santorini. We got picked up by a limo. I mean, we splurged. We got the fanciest hotel that you can ever imagine on the cliffs of Santorini facing.
How gorgeous. Yeah.
And that was going to be our one destination where we went all out, right? All the other places, like, let's just stay over the night, whatever. Yeah. Anyway, so we finally got there. We had massages inside of our hotel room to come in. We had a couples massage. We're getting dressed and ready for the pool. We're walking down the nice little white steps that you see pictured of Santorini. Yep. And this lady comes running out and she's like, Mr. Herrera, I'm sorry. You have to leave. You have to leave. And we're like, what's happening? What's going on? And she's like, Greece is going on strike. You're not going to be able to leave the island. There's no flights out. So we ended up having to, that night at like midnight, get on a ferry. And we arrived in Athens at 4 a.m. And they're on public strike. So when we got off the ferry, the lady said, she goes, when you get off that ferry, you and your wife run as fast as you can off that ship, off that boat, and get the first cab, the first person, or you start walking to the airport. She literally said that. And it's miles and miles and miles away. Oh. Otherwise, we wouldn't get out of Greece to go to Italy.
Yeah.
So we booked it. Courtney and I are both runners, man. We were like on Amazing Race. We jetted out of there, and we actually got into a cab with someone else and shared the cab fare all the way to the airport and got out. Awesome. So we never got to enjoy, but we still had to pay for our hotel. So we're going to go back to Santorini.
There you go. That would make perfect sense.
Yes. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started. So I want to start by just talking about your childhood. So, like, where did you grow up? What was your childhood life like?
I grew up here in San Antonio. I actually live in the same house I was born in.
You do now?
Yeah. I bought it from my parents. So our house was built in 1865. It was the very first house ever built in Live Oak. And I never wanted to leave it. So when my mom was ready to sell, Ricky and I bought it. And so my childhood was good. Like, I know a lot of people have like horror stories about their childhood and trauma. I don't. My dad was a police officer. My mom was a first grade teacher for 37 years. My biggest life change was when my dad went to Bosnia to work for the United Nations. And so it was just me and my mom. But I mean, my childhood was great. My parents had me at 43. It was almost like being raised by grandparents, So, I was spoiled rotten, got everything I wanted, had two people that completely and utterly believed in me through everything. At 16, I'll go back. At 15, my dad got diagnosed with melanoma on his back, and it quickly spread to his esophagus and then his brain. So it took 6 months, and at 16, I had lost my dad. We found out my dad had cancer in September. We then found out my brother-in-law, my sister is 24 years older than me. My brother-in-law was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer a month later. So my junior and senior year of high school were spent going back and forth to North Carolina to be with my sister and her two kids, my niece and nephew. My niece is only 2 years younger than I am. My nephew is 8 years younger than I am. So we were spending back and forth, and trying to help them out. January of my senior year, Craig, my brother-in-law, died. So that was a lot of death early on, not seriously early on. I mean, but I was a teenager. And so that really shaped my view of empathy for other people, because I never thought that was going to happen to me. And so that life experience, if I wouldn't have had it, I wouldn't be the same person. I wouldn't have gone to school here in San Antonio. I had a dream school and that's where I was going to go, but I couldn't leave my mom after that. So, but childhood was great. I mean, I had no complaints. I had amazing parents.
Where did you go to school?
I went to high school. I went to Judson.
Mm-hmm.
So
middle school?
Kitty Hawk.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, right in the same area. So Kitty Hawk, Judson, people talk about how horrible they are. Maybe it's because I'm just a nerd through and through. I love school. I love Judson. I had phenomenal teachers. I would never go back to high school again. Not if you paid me $1 million, I wouldn't do it. But I had an amazing education from that place. I was able to go into college ready, and I went to college as a junior. I mean, I had amazing AP and dual credit teachers. So I couldn't complain about that.
It's interesting that you said that you would not go back to your high school years. And that's just what's so awesome about talking with people is that you learn, differences of people. For me, I'm absolutely hands down going back to high school.
No.
I loved it. But I would say that I would be going back for different reasons.
Yeah.
To change some things about myself moving forward. And I felt like I still had a good educational career. I would not take that away because I would not change that.
Yeah.
Some other stuff like athletic stuff and personal stuff that I didn't find out about myself until later in life that I wish I would have had the insightfulness back then to make some different, some changes. But so the next question is, let's progress forward. College.
Mm-hmm.
What are some experiences that have stood with you over the years about college years? And you can take that question and go any direction. So I'm not looking for anything specific, but you kind of talked about your childhood. Let's talk about more of your academic growth in the college realm. And it can be socially and it can be academically. Just take it wherever you want it to go.
That's fine. So today is actually my wedding anniversary.
Happy anniversary. How many years?
You. 16.
Congratulations.
And Ricky and I have known each other since 8th grade. So college started, though, with us. Actually, today was my first day of college in 2004. And that started with us deciding we were going to date. And so I went into college very focused on the fact that I wanted to get married. That was it. I wanted to get married. I wanted to be a wife. I wanted to have kids. And when I first went into college, I wanted to be a teacher. It's what I had always wanted to be. And I thought I wanted to be an elementary school teacher. And so I went that path. And as part of my classes that I had to take an upper level government class. So I went to my upper level government class and I did amazing in it. And the professor, who was you just didn't tell her no, she said, you're gonna major in political science. You need to get involved in the legal system somehow. And I was like, people have told me that my entire life that I should be a lawyer. I was captain of the debate team in high school. I did all that stuff. Yeah, maybe I should look into being a lawyer. So I started going down that path. I decided I was going to major in political science, undergrad, and another major in sociology. So I was very involved with that aspect of campus life, but I was also very involved with campus ministry. I was the Peace and Social Justice Minister for campus ministry at the University of the Incarnate Word. And through that endeavor, I met Sister Martha Ann Kirk, and I became her grant coordinator. I got paid to help her with stuff. And so getting into that and being very mission-minded shaped me tremendously, because as the Peace and Social Justice Coordinator, one of the jobs that I was responsible for was an event called Alternative Spring Break. And it was supposed to be, hey, instead of going to party, come do mission work. So every year that I was at Incarnate Word until it was deemed unsafe, we went for spring break and lived with the people in Juarez, Mexico, in the colonias. We met with the mothers of the disappeared. We met with the maquiladora workers who had lost babies and young infants because of the unsafe working conditions. And so again, another huge eye opener to my little white bread world, you know, of this is right across a border. There's a fence, and then life completely changes. And so it really made me start thinking about what could I do to help others. And so I was like, well, as a lawyer, maybe I could be, you know, a child advocacy attorney or an immigration lawyer, somewhere along there. And so that last year, my junior year of college, I ended up getting to study abroad for like not a huge study abroad. It was like a month-long trip, but it was amazing. It was to England, and getting to see that was phenomenal. And then I went with Sister Martha Ann to Peru. And that was just unlike anything I've ever experienced, was going into Peru and meeting with the people and meeting with the nuns and getting to go and take classes at Bartholomew de las Casas was life-changing, because Peru went through a horrible season of terrorism under the Shining Path. And it was just, learning about it was horrible. But at Bartholomew de las Casas, it was learning about the reconciliation process for these parts of society to come back together and form a country again. And so that was eye-opening as well, as to how do you get over trauma? How do you help people through trauma? How do you make sure that when you're apologizing for something, that it's true and sincere and it's actually going to change something? So those were really shaping events in college. And I went and took my LSAT. I was going to go to law school, had been accepted into a few. And I was at my job at the time, and I was like, this is not what I want to do. I don't want to do this. I don't want to be a lawyer. I don't. I'm not going to be happy. And so I called Ricky and I said, Ricky, I'm not going to law school. I'm going to apply at Incarnate Word to get my teaching certificate, and I want to teach high school social studies. And he was like, what are you talking about? And I quit my job, and I started applying to every private school I possibly could. I got accepted into Incarnate Word's master's program to be able to get my certification. And I got hired at a tiny little school called Salem Sayers Baptist Academy out in Adkins, Texas, making $11,000 a year to teach 5th and 6th grade all subjects.
Wow.
When I told, he was like, what do you mean? Because I left a job making fairly good money right out of college to that. It was the best decision I ever made. I'm still in contact with those kids that were 5th and 6th graders at that little school. And I want to go back for the world. So college was a lot of different experiences for me. We got married during college, and we weren't able to have a baby until I was working on my master's. And so, but education has always been a good thing for me. I've cherished it. I love it. It's invigorating. And I went on to work on my PhD, and I have a lot of hours of it done. But when my kids started to ask me, Mom, why aren't you here on certain night? No, God gave me you. I'm going to be dedicated to you before I move on. I can always go back and get a degree.
I hear you on that. And it's so good to hear, because, everyone's college journeys are shaped differently by their experiences. Mm-hmm. And some people, should kids ever listen to this podcast, make the most of what you can when you're in college too, because those opportunities, especially to college students, trying to do what you did then now as an adult with kids, you know, life kind of gets in the way sometimes for a good reason. But when you're in college, you want to definitely take advantage of all those opportunities. And it sounds like your life after that was shaped definitely. And I'm sure you could probably share some academic stories too that kind of shaped you who you are, but it was outside of academics that shaped you as a person. So that's awesome. So you kind of talked a little bit about it, so we'll just kind of go there. You had a stop in Athens, Texas. So like where did your educational career take you from there to where you
Okay, so after teaching at Salem Sayers, I was hired on at a charter school. And it was on the west side of San Antonio, New Frontiers Charter School, teaching 6th grade social studies and 8th grade science. That's when I got pregnant with Shelby. It was a real eye-opening experience. And I don't mean this to be harsh towards anybody, but charter schools just aren't where it's at. And just the way they're able to treat their employees, the fact that you don't have to accept special ed students into your program. There was just a lot of different things that I was not happy with as a teacher. And so that's when I was able to get a job after that at Gus Garcia Middle School on the west side in Edgewood ISD. So Gus Garcia is off of Culebra and North General McMullen. I mean, at New Frontiers, we dealt with some of the stuff, but nothing like what I was going to experience that first year teaching. I was tested, I'll say that. And I fell in love with those kids, because kids are kids, regardless of where you are. And it took me having to realize that, because when I first went into teaching, as weird as this sounds now with who I am, I was very rules, deadlines, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And after 6 weeks there, I was like, this doesn't work. This is not how you teach. And I was pregnant again with my second child. So I had my first 3 kids within 3 years. And so when I came back from maternity leave, I was ready to be back in that classroom. And that's when my whole teaching philosophy changed. It's about relationships. It's about these kids knowing they're loved and having a safe place. If they don't remember a thing about U.S. history, so be it. But if they remember that they felt loved in that classroom, that is what matters. The next year was the year I started giving everybody a handshake at the door and doing positive notes home. So I watched so many teachers flush out of that school. And the way it was at Gus Garcia was you either had people who had been there since the 80s and they were still there because they loved it and they knew it and they were able to deal with it, or you were a brand new teacher and you quit 9 weeks in. So by the time I had been there 5 years, I was like one of the veteran teachers on campus. And I loved those kids. And so my principal at the time, she was a phenomenal human being. She died since then. She really started encouraging me, and I had just finished my master's at this point. And she was like, you should try administration. You're so good at lesson planning. And she was the one who actually came to me and said, hey, there's a coordinator job open in Shirt-Cibolo. You need to apply for it. I applied for it, went to the interview, and was offered the job. I thought I had done horribly. I really did. I remember walking to my car and looking and going, this is such a beautiful place, but it's just not going to happen. And I got the call and accepted the job. And my last day at Gus Garcia was May 10th, 2010, and I couldn't stop crying. My heart hurt. It hurt to leave the classroom. It hurt to leave those kids. So I think that probably should have served some type of purpose, but I was just like, you're being over emotional. It's okay. And so I went on to be a curriculum coordinator. And I spent 5 years of going, I want to get back to the classroom. I want to get back to the classroom because it's not the same. And nothing against anybody who does that job. It's a hard job and it's a needed job, but it's not my job. It's not what I was called to do. So when I got pregnant with my fourth child, when I got pregnant with Faith, I said, you know what? I've got to have summers again. I've got to have summers again. And I prayed about it and prayed about it and prayed about it. And when I was at church, our pastor gave a sermon on, are you where you're called to be? And I was like, all right, God, I hear you. I hear you. And I got a hold of HR the next day and started the process of going into the classroom. And it has been the best decision I've ever made.
And here you are.
Yeah, and here I am. And I love coming to work. Students make everything better. So this is hard right now, not having kids in the classroom, because that's truly why I'm here. Yes, I love history. History is important. If they don't remember 1607, 1620, I don't care. And I think for a lot of people, that's off-putting, that I'm not like, oh, my subject is the most important thing in the world. Well, it is, but do they understand that they are living history and that they can change the world by their actions? Do they understand the actions of unkind people versus kind people and the effect it can make on the world? Do you understand that you are loved and wanted and have a purpose, and we need you here because you have a story to continue? That's the purpose, not dead guys and dates. So that's really, my education journey up to this point. And I was like, when I was working as a curriculum coordinator, I started working in my PhD program on getting my administrator's certificate, and very early on realized that is not what I want to do either. So classroom is where it's at for me. And I'm okay with that. I think for a long time, it was put in my head that if I just stayed in the classroom, I was wasting an education. I was told by that same political science professor that I was wasting my potential by being a teacher. And I believed that for a long time, and that's not true. We need people with passion and love for what they're doing in a classroom more than we need somebody who is just trying to get out, to advance on to the next step. So, that plays a big part for me.
Yeah, and I totally agree. I think that you've mentioned a couple of things where I have a different experience because you had people telling you what they thought you should be doing, mm-hmm. and far too often, like yourself, you listen to those and it becomes your true statement. You're like, okay, and then you start feeling good about yourself and you go down that path. But on the flip side too, like I remember people telling me this when I was in college. My academic advisor at the University of Tulsa before I left, and he would always tell this to me, but I didn't know what it meant. He would say, Michael, you could do anything you ever wanted to. You could even sell ice to an Eskimo.
Yeah.
Like, what is this guy saying? But then to find out, like, that's part of me. Like, I communicate. I talk to people. I have relationships with people. I got into personal training. I became a massage therapist. I became a distributor of Advocare, selling nutritional supplements. And but if you look at all of those, as a personal trainer, you got to have relationships. Mm-hmm. As a massage therapist, you have to carry a conversation with someone while you're giving them a Swedish massage. Mm-hmm. As a nutritional supplement advisor, relationships, communication, sales, now education, it's still a relationship thing. Mm-hmm. What am I trying to sell? I'm not trying to sell my content. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to sell the idea of what we want to instill in these kids when they leave these halls.
Yep.
And so it kind of goes both ways, but to have the intuitiveness for you to listen to what you thought you were supposed to do, but ultimately in the end, you listen to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why you're here today. So that's kind of my takeaway with what you just said there. But so you kind of addressed this already, and I'm hearing it, but just so that I can ask the question and then give you just a little opportunity to say this, just answer, why do you teach?
Kids. I don't think enough people realize how important young generations are. They are going to be the ones making the decisions when we are old. They are going to be able to change past trauma and past history that we haven't been able to reconcile. And if we don't give them the right tools to do that, we're dooming ourselves. We're dooming ourselves to repeat history that's ugly and hard because we haven't instilled the values in these kids that they need. I'll put this out there. I'm the youth coordinator at my church. I lead our youth group as well. And making sure that kids realize their importance, realize that there are better things out there than maybe what they're experiencing at the moment. That's why I teach, is because these people are our future leaders. These ladies and gentlemen that are sitting, these young kids that are sitting in front of us, they are tomorrow. And what a horrible disservice to my own children if I don't believe in them and try to get them to be able to think critically and form good relationships and love one another so that they can go out and change the world. And it's okay to tell kids that we've made mistakes and that they are going to be the ones that are going to be able to do these awesome and amazing things, as long as they don't get stuck in the same places that we did.
Yep. And I hear you, because I think transparency and education, I don't know. I'll go ahead and just say, like, I'll be wrong by saying this. I think transparency and education is the minority.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you, and we've had conversations before. And I think we're parallel in that idea and that concept that we need to be transparent for our kids, which kind of is a segue into the next question here. Do you think that relationships should be at the center of teaching? If so, how do you keep relationships at the center of teaching in your classroom?
You can't have anything without relationships. Okay, you want them to learn content? You want them to be able to pass a test? Fine. You don't have to have a relationship for that. But if you want kids to be able to connect outside of your classroom to bigger life situations and carry it with them, you have to build relationships. Research keeps showing us that if you don't have Maslow, you can't do Bloom's. Well, guess what? Maslow says they have to feel safe and nurtured. That's relationship. So if I want those higher level thinking skills to be able to come out, I have to build that relationship first. And it really is going to have to go back to, how are you treating those that are the least among you? And what I mean by that are those students who everybody comes to you and says, "Oh, you have them in class? Good luck with that, buddy."
Bring them on.
Yeah, good luck with that. Because I'm going to build a relationship with that kid, and I'm going to make sure that that kid knows that I love them and that I believe in them. Because in every single person, there is a human, a light, a soul that needs to be nurtured and cared for. I don't care if you don't like somebody. I don't care if they're your worst enemy. To me, my personal social moray is that if you are a human, I have to treat you with dignity and respect, period. So those kids that get that label, that's not fair to them, because they have, being a sociology person, they're living off of mirror theory. Everybody's always told them their entire life, you're nothing, you're bad, you're a failure, you're just like this person or just like that person. You can't do that in the classroom. And you can't get to the content until you make sure they know that you believe in them and love them. And I think what we have to realize as well as educators is that these kids are in a world where oftentimes they are ignored because of the way our world has been shaped. And it's no one's fault. I'm not trying to place blame in any one area. But when we are such a go, go, go society, such a on the phone, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat is more important society, you got kids that don't know what it means to be accepted for who they are. So building relationships in the classroom is essential. And it doesn't have to be anything over the top. And it should never be fake. Kids know fake. If you're trying to fake your enthusiasm, kids are going to read right through that and they will call you on your BS real quick. They're going to know if it's genuine or not. You have to be yourself in what you do. But as you are being yourself in what you do, you also have to take a step back and make sure you're in this for the kids.
Absolutely. I think authentic relationships cannot be faked, right? So, you've got to, and I agree with you completely wholeheartedly, and I think I couldn't have said it better the way you put it, but you have to have connections before content. And, and everybody listening to this probably right now, you've probably heard before, kids don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So until that foundation is built, just like a home, what are you building your foundation on? Yep. If on day one you're spewing content, you're building your foundation on my content is more important than you. What I also heard you say is we have to treat them as humans.
Yes.
I think that, I'm not pointing fingers, but it's just, I don't care if you teach at Steele High School or if you teach anywhere else, we treat them as students sometimes first. No. That's that content relationship, right? Like we have to treat these kids as humans because they are humans first when they walk into your door. Yes. They're not a student yet. You haven't even said a word yet. So it's not a student walking into your door that comes in on, Monday or Tuesday, September 8th, hopefully, God willingly.
Coming back. I'm so ready.
It's a human being who just woke up to the night before their parents fighting in the hallway or in the living room, and you closed your door and put your headphones on so that you didn't have to hear mom and dad fight, and now they're getting a divorce, and you're walking into my room crying, but all I care about is I got to get my lesson done to get you to pass that test. Meanwhile, this kid doesn't care about anything you have to say in your classroom because of what they dealt with. And so I always like to say that, you know what? We've got a lot of drama queens and kings in our school. When it's all said and done, what are they seeking? They're seeking our attention. You're either going to give them that attention or you're not. There's no in between. So why is it that you can't step out in the hallway and talk to this kid for 1 minute, make a connection to let them know that you see them, you value them, and that you're willing to hear them so that when they come into the classroom, they're going to value what you have to teach. They're going to hear what you have to teach, and they're going to see what you're trying to teach them. That goes back to those connections first. That goes back to treating them as human beings first and students second. And that goes the same thing for athletics. They're not our athletes first. They are human beings first. So to get them to perform for us on the field or the track or the diamond, you've got to make those connections first. So thank you for sharing that, because that's so important for teachers to hear. And my idea behind this podcast, first and foremost, is just to give teachers like yourself a platform to share your story. Why do you teach? Who are you? But we all have our different opinions on this, and I'm sure throughout these podcast interviews, I'm going to get some different answers, and not everyone's going to agree, but it's okay. It's who you are, and it's what shaped you. But at the same time, what you have just shared and what I have just shared may reach a first-year teacher that, like you and like me, when we went through the process of education, how much time was spent on teaching us how to be a teacher and building connections and relationships? It was about discipline. It was about managing your classroom. It was about administrative type stuff. It's about how to write a lesson plan.
That's 45 pages long.
where in, and I don't have an educational degree. I got my alternative certification, but even in an alternative certification, nowhere in there was a chapter, was a class. Think about this, like, and I don't know if you know this or not, and I'm just throwing this out there, like, is there a class, if I went to college and I'm a freshman in college, getting a degree in education, did I take a 3-hour class on building relationships? I don't know if that exists. So is it really the fault of the teacher coming into education, content driven, relationship second? But it's like teachers like you and I that have to share our stories and give it a voice so that maybe we can influence just one teacher. If we can influence one teacher to have a different way of thinking, and I don't care if you're a veteran teacher listening to this podcast, if you've been teaching for 15 years and you thought that you needed to be content driven so that you can appease your administration so that the kids pass the test, and you're hearing this about relationships for the first time, come talk to us. Come have that conversation with what we do in our classrooms to build those relationships and connections. And honestly, that's why I'm having this podcast with you, because I know that's the kind of teacher you are. And I know you'd be a great candidate for an interview. So let's kind of change gears just a little bit here.
Yeah.
So share a story or a pivotal moment in your educational career that you'll never forget. So not as a student, but as a teacher. Obviously, we don't want to share names, but maybe a story or an impactful moment, a pivotal moment that, and hopefully in your educational career before you retire, you have more. But is there maybe a story or something that you'd be willing to share?
Yeah, I could share a lot from Gus, but I'm not going to. I'm going to share something from here. So one of my kids, he was one of those kids, you know, always in the principal's office, always getting in trouble, always talked about by other teachers, had a hard education career and had a lot going on at home that people didn't know about. And so one of the things that I do every week is I sit down and I write positive letters home. And I do not do it if I don't mean it. I'm going to be real honest with that. Like, if I don't mean it, if you haven't shown it to me, I'm not writing it. But this kid loved American history. I don't know why, but of all things to love. And he also loved Marvel. So we hit it off with that. He played a lot of the same video games that my husband and I play. So I was able to connect with him on that. But man, he loved history and he was great in my class. Yes, he was goofy and he said things that I was just like, dude, that just can't come out of your mouth. We got to put a filter on, you know. But most of the time, I don't know, it's very hard to make me mad. I'm going to laugh before I do anything else. And so, but he was just so engaged and he was doing so good. And so I wrote his parents a note. And the entire note was about how amazing this kid is. And it must have gotten to them over the weekend because he came in and he told me before anybody got here, second period, he said, "You are the only teacher that has ever given me a compliment without following with a but right there." That was my moment. That's when I realized that we have kids who have never been complimented without it being a compliment sandwich. I hate that. I would never do that. That is so fake. That's not how the world works. And so that moment of realizing, you know what? This kid just needs one person to believe in him. His parents found me at graduation and said they still have that card on their refrigerator. So, you know, I mean, you've got to, and I think as a parent, I can't imagine if all I ever heard from other people was, your child's a disruption, your child talks too much, your child doesn't behave, your child doesn't this. What does that I mean, you love your kids with every ounce of your being. And to keep continually hearing that your child isn't good enough, what a horrible feeling that must be as a parent. And I think it makes parents resentful of the education system, or even worse, it makes them resentful against their kid. That's not what I ever want to do as a teacher. Ever. I don't care if I have a kid who is a behavior problem day in and day out. How do you find something good about that human? And I'm going to be honest with you. We all know students that's really hard.
Absolutely.
It's really hard, but you have to, because if you don't, you're never going to even have a chance of helping that kid. And I know there's so many kids that we want to say they're 17. I mean, I teach juniors. They're 17. They're done. They're molded. No, they aren't. They're not. There's adults in their 40s who still aren't molded. It might be harder to turn that stone because it's been able to set longer. But humans are amazing because we're able to adapt and change and overcome. And so I think we do need people who continually tell us that there are things that we do right and that there is value in us as simply being a human being. I think too often we want to put parameters along what makes you worthy. Only if you work with this job are you worthy. Only if you make this amount of money are you worthy. No, that is not it. And if that's how you feel about the kids in your classroom, I'm going to be real blunt. Why are you in that classroom? If you don't see all students as worthy of an education, worthy of basic human respect, might not be the right profession for you. And those are harsh words. And I understand that.
But it's the reality.
But it's the reality of the situation. We are here as a profession. Yes, it is a profession. And we should be treated as professionals. And we should be able to have the same rights that other workplaces have. But we are in a very special situation in that we are working with youth who are a fragile part of society. So when I was wanting to do my PhD, they have things that are called fragile communities that you're wanting to work with. Kids are one of those. You got to handle with care. If it says fragile on it, you handle with care.
Absolutely.
So,
I've heard you talk about, things that you do. And that's kind of part of the podcast too, is to give teachers tools and strategies that they can use in the classroom. And it's just a simple note home, and you talked about the compliment sandwich, right? And just so that the listeners can hear this too, one thing that I've done, I don't do it every single day, but it's something that I either read or heard, and I tried this out. The impact that it has when you give someone a compliment, their eyes light up, their heart expands a little more. Mm-hmm. Those are those deposits that you make in their lives, right? Whether you know them or not.
Yep.
So it's a 10 penny strategy. All right. I give my 10 cents a day, and I would put 10 pennies in one pocket, and I would seek out opportunities, not because I'm just trying to do the compliment sandwich, but opportunities that warranted my compliments to them. I would give a kid a compliment. It didn't have to be academics. No. I absolutely love your hair today. Like, whatever. I mean, like, anything, your outfit or your smile is just infectious. Like, oh my gosh, keep smiling. Have a good day, just whatever. And I would transfer 1 penny over to the other pocket. Mm-hmm. Hopefully by the end of the day, I've switched all 10 to the other pocket.
That's
and so I did that for a while. But you know what? In some ways you could argue and say that's like a compliment sandwich, right? But I was still looking for those opportunities. And in the end, guess what? It was all about impacting just one kid. And there were days maybe I just moved 1 penny over, but the expectation for myself was look for those opportunities to give something positive to a kid. So we're going to wrap things up. I've got one last question for you here. If you could thank any teacher at Steele High School right now, who would that teacher be and why?
Oh my goodness.
You have to pick one.
Oh my goodness. Give me a minute.
So I'll give you a minute while I'm saying this. So guys out there, hopefully you're listening to this. My hope is that I will interview every teacher on campus at some point. How that works around our schedule, I don't know. But ultimately, we are a staff, we are a family, we are a community. And just like I'm trying to tell you right now that we have to build relationships with the students, we have to build relationships with ourselves first. And I'll be honest, there's people in this school that when I walk down the hallways, I don't know their name. And if I don't know their name, there's no connection. So until I can build a connection with a teacher, I've got to learn their story. And hopefully through this podcast, people can kind of learn our story. But there are always people on campus that do things for us, whether it's something that they've done, whether they've said, whether they've stepped into our classroom to teach our class because we had to go to this doctor's appointment, we had to do something. There's always a teacher to thank. So hopefully I've given you enough time here to think about who you'd like to thank and why.
I'm going to thank Tammy Van. Coming in, nothing but help. Nothing but what can I do? How can I help? Hey, here are lessons already pre-done. That's not the norm in education, to just take somebody in. And she did. And she also calms me down when I'm having my little OCD moments. She's a person who can just come in and go, Becky, breathe. It's okay. It's okay. Take a breath. It's going to be all right. Today is going to pass just like all the other ones. And I respect a lot of her passion for education and what she's able to bring to the table. And I truly appreciate who she is as a person.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. So Tammy, hopefully at some point you listen to this podcast, but definitely kudos to you for what you've done in helping Becky in the classroom. So Becky, thank you for taking the time, just kind of sitting and chatting and talking about life and talking about education and how it's impacted your life. So I definitely appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to Keeping Up with the Knights. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure you subscribe and click the notification button so you know when the next episode is released, and then share it with your friends and colleagues. If you're so inclined to do so, would you please rate and review this podcast to help me grow our community of listeners? I hope there was something that you heard today that allowed you to connect outside the classroom. Now, more than ever, we need each other as a support system, and we need to continue to make this the best high school in the state of Texas. Thank you, Knight Nation. Now, go be someone's champion today.